In the summer of 1922, a young man named Nick Carraway arrives in New York, eager to start his career as a bond salesman. He rents a modest house in West Egg, Long Island, an area which is mostly populated by those with new money. His next-door neighbor Jay Gatsby is a perfect example of this, an extravagantly wealthy yet mysterious man who throws lavish parties every weekend for hundreds of guests. Since he doesn't have many connections in New York yet, Nick drives across the bay to East Egg, where the old money rich reside, to have dinner with his cousin Daisy Buchanan and her husband Tom, a hulking, arrogant man who has a tendency to force his way onto other people. Daisy also introduces Nick to her friend Jordan Baker, a young competitive golfer and socialite. At dinner, it becomes clear that the couple's marriage is not all sunshine and rainbows, and Jordan reveals to Nick that Tom is rumored to keep a mistress in the city. Confused by the evening and a little disgusted, Nick heads home, but catches a glimpse of his neighbor Gatsby standing alone on his dock and staring searchingly across the bay to the distant green light from Daisy's house. Soon after, Tom rather forcibly insists that Nick accompany him into the city, but on the way they take a detour to meet his mistress in the Valley of Ashes, a grey industrial area between Long Island and New York. The other woman is Myrtle, the wife of a car garage owner named George Wilson, who is completely oblivious to her affair with Tom and thinks he keeps coming around because he is considering selling him his car. Myrtle sneaks away from her husband and joins Tom and Nick on their venture into the city, where he takes her shopping and then hosts an alcohol-fueled party at their rented flat for a random assortment of guests. As the night wears on, Myrtle begins to taunt Tom about Daisy, and he snaps, striking her in the face and breaking her nose. Although he is an unwilling bystander to these events, Nick seems to be a popular guest, as not long after he receives a formal invitation from Gatsby to attend his next party. These weekly events are an almost obnoxious display of wealth and excess, to which countless people flock, even though pretty much all of them have not been invited. Because most of the partygoers have absolutely no idea who Gatsby is, or even what he looks like, there is an abundance of rumors about his past and how he got his money, with some speculating that he's a bootlegger, a war hero, or a German spy. Thankfully, Nick spies a familiar face in the crowd, Jordan Baker, whom he attaches himself to for the rest of the night. The pair eventually meet Gatsby as well, although Nick doesn't realize it at first because he is much younger and more approachable than he previously imagined from all the stories about him. Rather mysteriously, Gatsby pulls Jordan aside for a private conversation, which she describes to Nick as the most amazing thing, although she doesn't reveal what was said just yet. Gatsby also seems to take a particular interest in Nick, inviting him to fly with him in his hydroplane the following day. At his insistence, Gatsby begins to spend more time with Nick from then on, even taking him to lunch with one of his shady business partners. Afterwards, he gives him a brief and unasked-for overview of his life, claiming to be from a wealthy family in the Midwest, who was educated at Oxford, and then went on to be a jewel collector, hunter, and war hero. His story sounds almost rehearsed, however, and kind of absurd, which leaves Nick questioning whether he is really telling him the truth or not. This sudden insight into his background is clearly to make Nick feel more comfortable with doing him a favor, as Gatsby has a bold and uncomfortable request for him: to invite Daisy to his house for tea so that Gatsby can accidentally drop by and see her. Later, Jordan fills in the blanks by revealing what Gatsby told her at the party. Back in 1917, Gatsby and Daisy had a brief romance, but the relationship was cut short when he was called up to war. Unsure if he would ever return, and swayed by the much wealthier and socially elite Tom Buchanan, Daisy decided to get married, but Gatsby was never able to move on from his love for her. He dedicated his life to acquiring the money and status he would need to win her back, and it is obvious that the reason he throws his over-the-top weekly parties has simply been in the hopes of catching her attention. Feeling empathy for Gatsby's situation, Nick decides to help him in his quest for love by going along with his plan. But on the big day, Gatsby is a nervous wreck and tries to micromanage every last detail, sprucing up Nick's house and even arranging for someone to come and cut his grass in the hopes that their reunion will be as magical as he has dreamed of for so many years. He is so anxious that he almost calls the whole thing off minutes before she arrives. But sure enough, when Daisy gets there, the pitifully lovesick Gatsby turns up at the front door as if he was just another guest for tea. This is the moment that Gatsby has manifested into existence, but at first, their interactions are not quite as he had imagined, and in fact are painfully awkward. However, Nick makes the wise decision to leave the pair alone for a half hour, and when he returns, the scene is totally different. Realizing that he never forgot about her, Daisy is weeping tears of joy, while Gatsby is of course ecstatic that all his years of pursuit, patience, and dedication have finally paid off. They decide to visit Gatsby's house, so he can show her what a wealthy man he has become, dragging a very unwilling Nick along with them as a third wheel. Guiding them through each room, Gatsby parades every splendid, opulent detail of the house before Daisy, leaving her suitably impressed, and the two begin an affair soon after. When a reporter starts sniffing around Gatsby's house to uncover the mystery of his life and enormous wealth, his real origin story is revealed. It turns out that his real name was James Gatz, the son of poor farmers in North Dakota. Because he always dreamed of a better life, however, he created a new identity for himself at a young age, and learned the ways of the rich and famous through his mentor Dan Cody, a copper magnate whom he saved from a storm. Upon his death, Gatsby was set to inherit a substantial amount of money, but was cheated out of it by Cody's ex-wife, leaving him penniless once again. Meanwhile, Daisy and Gatsby's affair has continued strong, until one scorching hot day when Nick, Jordan, and Gatsby spend the day at the Buchanan's mansion. The unbearable heat only adds to the tensions among the group, and as he watches Daisy and Gatsby interact, it suddenly clicks in Tom's head that they are seeing each other behind his back. Even though he is guilty of the same thing himself, Tom is absolutely seething inside, so when the group decide to drive to town for the afternoon, he insists upon driving Gatsby's car with Nick and Jordan, while Gatsby and Daisy travel in Tom's coupe. Along the way, they stop at George Wilson's garage, who confides in Tom that he is planning to move out west with his wife because he suspects her of having an affair. With both his wife and his mistress slipping out of his grasp, Tom is ready to snap, and things quickly come to a head when the group converge at the Plaza Hotel. Tom confronts Gatsby about his affair and accuses him of acquiring his wealth through bootlegging and other illegal activities. In retaliation, Gatsby taunts Tom by telling him that Daisy never loved him. The pressure is now on Daisy to make a choice between the two men, but at this critical moment, she is unable to back up Gatsby's claims and admits that she loves them both. Dismissively, Tom tells Daisy to go home with Gatsby in his car, as he knows inside that he has won the fight for her. On the way home, however, disaster strikes, as Tom, Nick, and Jordan discover that Myrtle Wilson, Tom's mistress, has been hit and killed by Gatsby's car. She had run out into the road to stop the car, assuming that it was Tom's since he was driving it earlier. The trio rush back home, and Nick learns that it was not Gatsby, but Daisy who was driving the car, although he insists on taking the blame for it. The next day, the devastated George is fixated on getting revenge for his wife's death, and to shift the suspicions from himself, Tom tells him that the car belongs to Gatsby. Blinded by grief, George stumbles into Gatsby's house and shoots him in his pool, before ending his own life with the same gun. The task of arranging Gatsby's funeral falls to Nick, as the many hundreds of people who flocked around him in life are nowhere to be seen in death. Only his father, Nick, and one party guest attend the quiet affair, and for all intents and purposes, the world seems to have already forgotten him. Disgusted by the shallowness and moral decay of the East Coast rich, Nick decides to move back to the Midwest. Tom and Daisy have quietly moved away too, with no consequences for their role in the deaths of Gatsby, Myrtle, and George. One last time, Nick visits Gatsby's mansion, which is now in disrepair, and looks out over the water to Daisy's dock, imagining him standing there night after night, so close yet so far from achieving his life's great dream of reuniting with her.